Hello, welcome to the April 19th, 2022 Club Cubase live stream. I'm going to do a quick audio test, make sure everything is working as expected. Bear with me just for a moment, and we'll get started. Hello, welcome to the April 19th, 2022 Club Cubase. Okay, everything sounds fine on my monitoring computer. My name is Greg Undo. I'll be the host for the live stream today. If you have not attended a live stream before, how it works is you could ask questions in the live chat field, or you could just simply send a question in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. So when asking questions, it's always helpful if you could specify which computer platform you're running, whether it's Mac OS or Windows, which version of Cubase, whether it's LEAI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, and if it's which version it is also in regards to like version 10, version 11, version 12. That information is helpful. Realize that my ability to answer questions in real time will soon be eclipsed by the number of questions. We'll try to get through all the questions as completely and succinctly in order. If you don't see an immediate response to your question, realize that I'm trying the whole live stream to catch up to all the questions asked. So if we could refrain from asking the same questions over and over again, that would just kind of speed up the whole process. I would appreciate that. And we should, several hours after the live stream concludes, we should have an index of all the topics that have been discussed in the live stream and all the questions with timestamps, and that should be pinned to the top of the comments field. And if you wanted to search for topics that may have been covered in previous live streams, you could go to cubaseindex.com, and Jan from Stockholm has been kind enough to create that wonderful resource for us to use as a reference. Also, I want to give special thanks to Agent K and Jazz Dude, who serve as moderators. They're not Steinberg employees. They just kind of do this to make it a better community. So we want to give special thanks to them. Also, Jazz Dude does a lot of work creating the Cubase Nation Discord, which is a wonderful resource of different information in addition to all the official Steinberg channels. So we want to give special thanks to that. So let's go ahead and get started with some of our questions. So first question, hi Greg, how can I hear the import audio samples and the metronome at the same time? So probably the easiest way to do this might be just to use instead of importing, but maybe just to come over here, let's say I'm just going to audition sounds in the media bay. So, and once we're here, we could go to any file. So when you come here, we could just go to your file browser and we could look for any files. But if we wanted to quickly audition, different audio files like loops with the audio, we could just do that. So we could align the beats to. So we could have, if it has tempo stamps, we could just do that. But here we could audition any audio file, and if I just wanted to go to just my file browser, at this point we could say let's go to documents, and if I wanted to just come over here and I'd be able to audition different audio files, I could just, so these won't necessarily, so we could just so if we wanted to just come here and say, okay, let's get to our, so we could just kind of do it like that. So give that a try, maybe auditioning your different samples directly from the Right Zone Media Bay, and then give that a shot. All right, so we have a question. Hello, Greg. Is it possible to back up and restore the recent project list in the hub? So I don't think that there's a way to back it up. It's just going to be kind of dynamically going based on the actual recent project. So if we come over here, we can see our recent projects. So, I'm not sure if there's a benefit to backing and restoring that data, but, we could always see what the recent projects are. So, I'm not sure, if there's a benefit. I don't know of a way to back that up or why I would want to, but so I guess if you wanted to go back, it is just a indication of the recent projects. But I don't know of a way to back it up or to restore the list. It's always going to be kind of dynamically changing based on what projects have recently been opened or closed. All right, so we have Richard James saying hi to everyone, and we have Alfred checking in from Montreal. Richard James has a question. Is there a file that stores all the rating states information? A friend has lost all of his during the upgrade and would like them back without having to go through the whole list again. So I think if we come over, and this could be in different locations, but I think it's going to be in the preferences. I believe all of that information is going to be stored. Let's take a look on the Mac OS, which is what I have. Let's go to the library, and it might be under preferences. So let's say if we wanted to, so it might be like this little XML file, like media browser favorites.pxml. That might be the file. It might also be kind of, so it could be that. I think that might be the particular file. And then if you just copy it from the library folder of, Cubase 12 or from Cubase 11 to Cubase 12, I think that would do it. But there's also a mediabay.db file, and that may contain the information if the mediabay media browser favorites.pxml file doesn't do the trick. I would try that. All right, so we see from, I'm just going to break out my chat so I don't have to scroll as much. Bear with me just for a second. You see it's nice weather in Europe. All right, so we see, hey Greg, how do I program the logical editor to create a major or minor chord based on my root note? I'm trying to make a hotkey for this. All right, so let's say we have kind of a Rhodes patch here. So let's see if we could program this. Okay, so I will just put in, let's say, a C note here. Let me just... Okay, so let's see if we go to our MIDI logical editor. And let's get to setup. And we'll see there's a lot of new presets as well. So let me just see if there's one that might already be created that might do this. All right, so let's see if we could just create one. So we'll say type is, so I think we want to choose, we'll try insert exclusive. So we'll say type is equal to note. And let's say value 1, we want to add, let's say, four. And value 1, let's say if we come here and we just set the value here. And now let's say 7. Let's see if that. just take this into full screen key editor. Okay, so let's see if we just do an insert. Okay, and let's see if we just do one of these at a time. So I'll remove this. Okay, and so we do that, we get the major third, and let's see if we can, if we put a 7 in, if we get the fifth. Okay. So I think if we maybe do this, it's going to take that particular note and add both of those together. So let's say we'll just take this particular note and I'll say let's add a major third. So we'll call this a user preset. So we'll say add major third. And now let's say we want this to be 3. So we'll save this as a preset and we'll call this add minor third. Okay, so I'm going to now create a macro. So let's come over here to our key commands. And let's say we'll add, we'll do new. So we'll call this root note to major chord. And I will come over here to the process logical preset. So we'll say major third, add, and then let's make it a minor third. Okay, so now if I select this particular note and let's run the macro. Root note to major chord, that we could just do it just like that. And if we wanted to do root note to minor chord, we would just come over to our key commands and we'll say a new macro again. And we'll just reverse those. So let's say we'll go to our process logical editor preset, process logical preset, and we'll say, let's add a minor third first. So we'll just come here, we'll add that, and then add a major third. So I'll go ahead and delete this, and let me just copy this note later in time. Okay, so for this one, I want to make it a major chord, and we could assign a keyboard shortcut to the macro. So we'll come here and we'll say root note to major chord, All right, so we have that done, and let's do a root note to minor chord, see if that works. So again, we'll just come to the macros, and we'll say root note to minor chord, and then we could just see that spelled out. And to assign these to key commands, we could just now come over to macro, and then we could see our root note to major chord, root note to minor chord, and you could assign those different keyboard shortcuts directly there. So give that a try and let me know if that works. So we're kind of using two different instances of the logical editor. All right, so we see Walter Blackledge, and if you're watching this live, make sure that you introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. All right, and Walter's from St. Louis, so glad you can make it today. All right, so I see, hi Greg, I put everything to the highest settings in Cubase. When I work with third-party plugins, it can't handle much plugins. When I open Reaper, it can have 100 times more. Why is that? So I doubt you'd have 100 times more plugins. But, there are, make sure, that you're, if you can tell us which third-party plugins that you're running. But also one thing to check is, sometimes you may have plugins. If you go to your preferences and go to VST to plugins, you could suspend VST plugin processing when no audio signals are received. So try checking that and see if that makes a difference. But if you could let us know what plugins, and if you want to send me kind of maybe a video, if it's going to be the same exact settings, and also make sure that within your device setup that when you go to your studio setup and you get to your audio system, that you have multi-processing turned on, you have ASIO Guard. If you're running Windows, make sure that you have the Steinberg power scheme also enabled. Okay, so we just see a question from Benny. So great to see him. I believe from Sweden. Can you please show me free warp again? I had a little problem with that. Cubase 12. Okay, so if we have an audio file, so let's say I want to take this particular drum loop, we could just go to free warp, and if we kind of zoom in a little bit, we could drop in different warp markers. So I can say, okay, I want a warp marker here, here, here. I'll move this, and let's say, so we could kind of drop our markers in like so. And then if we wanted to do free warping at this point, I could just, when we see, we move this over and we see kind of that warp marker here turn white. At that point, we could just reposition that warp marker. Now, another way of there's a couple different ways of getting warp markers. So as audio is recorded into Cubase, it's automatically going to figure out by default settings, and you could deactivate it in a preference, but by default settings, it's going to automatically determine the hit points that are going on. So if we're in the sample editor here and we have the hit points enabled, we can now just come over here and create warp markers based on those hit points. And now when we go to our warp tool and we have it set to free warp, all of the hit points have now translated, so I don't have to select multiple events constantly. So once we have that, but at that point, whatever marker that you want, whatever point in time that you want to move, just kind of go a little bit. You see the arrows, and there's a line just to the left of the left arrow. As soon as the warp marker turns white, then you could adjust and reposition the different events like that. So let me know if that helps, Benny. All right, so we see a question in the drum map editor. When looking for a map, I have so many maps that the list takes up 2 screens and I cannot see all the maps, so I cannot choose some because they get cut off from view. So let's see if we can take a quick look. I don't have 2 screens worth of drum maps. But maybe if you just go to the drum setup here, that you could select, let's see if this will automatically just load up the particular drum map here. But you should be able to just kind of, maybe if you go to the drum map setup, and then you could select directly from here. So and if you're, so maybe if you kind of play around, and you could also remove different drum maps here. But, see if, because I think if you have more than 2 pairs here, that you could probably just see this. But yeah, there's some parts of the program where, they may not have intended you to have 14,000 presets of quantizing and stuff like that. So, but I'll make sure to pass that along. But see if you use the drum map setup, if that helps. All right, so we see Jan from Stockholm. Okay, so we see is the Spectrum question from Dallas LaRue from Las Vegas, I believe. So question is the Spectrum analyzer in supervision, and can it be used to find the best frequencies between the kick and the bass? So yeah, let's go ahead and take a quick look at it. So let's say if we wanted to come over here, let's get to... All right, so let's say if we're... So I'll go to my control room here. And let's go to the inserts. So let's say we want to go to... So we can see our spectrums here. So if we want to just solo the kick, and let's say if we solo the bass, so we could have this kind of, show the exact frequencies here. So let's say if we... But you could also, something that's kind of interesting is we could just say, okay, I wanted to do side chaining. So let's say if I just wanted to look at kick for this side chain input. So we could sidechain different inputs and see what frequencies are going on. And you could also look at this as a spectrum bar if you wanted to. So if we wanted to mute the bass part, we come over here. So let's say, and even if you wanted to just look at particular channels. So let's say, again, we will sidechain just to our kick. So you could definitely kind of use that to find problematic frequencies between your kick and snare. All right, and we have Fabio from Italy checking in. We see Sir Robert from Atlanta joining us. We have Razel from Denmark. All right, so we see Gareth just saying from Bilbao checking in. So, and just apologizing. He sent me a bunch of songs. So yeah, I just have a bunch of work stuff to do before Thursday, so I should have some time to get into it. So, be no problem to get into it. So I just see a question. Greetings, Greg. Is there a way to auto name tracks from event names? So I think, depending on how you do it. So let's say if I grab a particular track, so let's say if I just wanted to take a particular audio file, and if I drag this over, that the event name is automatically derived from, or the track name is derived from the event name. So, if you just, depending on how you import the files themselves, if you rename the events here, so let's say if we select, like the event name, we could copy that and, paste the names over. So if you wanted to do that quite easily. So I'm not sure if there's a way to extract the event name and paste it. So you might have to do it manually, but if you drag and drop to start, the event name will be the basis for or the audio file will be the basis for the track name. So let me know if that helps. Okay, so we just see a question. Just want to ask why my chord pads does not working using my Arturia Keylab, but the DAW controls are working. Is there settings I need to change or something? So, make sure that you don't. So I'm not sure if you're running version 12 or not, but if you have the controller already defined for different functions in the remote control, that could, I think in 12.0 that might block the particular events from broadcasting. But again, you could just come to any particular track here and be able to, let's say if we go to this, so let me just go over here to like this Rhodes, but you should be able to automatically, just, and we go to the settings, you could see like these particular keys will trigger those functions. And you may have to sometimes also, if you want it to pass, you could also put this into chord pads so that as you would trigger, you could have the chord pads themselves automatically serve as the input, but also check here and you could see in the settings area. So once we go to like your settings, you could also set up kind of what your remote control keys are and which keys are actually triggering different chord pads, just like that. All right. Bear with me just for a second. All right, so we see a question from James Bond. One, how can I hide CC in a selected event so it only shows when I want? Each time I open a new MIDI event, I need to hide all CC. It's a pain. So if there is a number of different CC messages, so let's say if, we have modulation here. So let's say if we're in... Let me just draw in some CCs. Okay, let's say we have expression. Okay, so it's really, if you come here, you could just choose, so let's say now when I go to expression, I go to a different part. It really is kind of whatever the last setting you had for your MIDI CCs will be carried over. So if you click here, you could also just say, show velocity only. So there's going to be different presets, but you could just say, I just want it to come here and just say show velocity lane only. And then at that point, whenever you go to another part, so let's say I create a different, we'll go to a different part here. I'll just do it not on a drum track. So let's say I go to my synth bass. When I double click, it's only going to show the velocity. But if I come here and say, okay, I want to see modulation. So say we have modulation data here in this particular part, and then I double click here. So it's going to be kind of saved with the particular part. So again, if you go to the controller lane here, you could have different presets, which is what a lot of people end up doing, but you could also just choose to show velocity lane only. So give that a shot. All right, so we see John Costigan his computer's kind of back in business. All right, so we have a question. New feature for FX modulator. Double click on the node and enter any value for the note. Reason the resolution of the small editor window while moving the node with shift mouse is too small. So I'll go ahead and pass that along, but we'll just show this and see if we wanted to take a look at it. Let's say on a audio track, we'll go to inserts and we'll go to the FX modulator under the modulation. So let's say if I wanted to come to volume, okay, so I think it could depend on, like here we can go to consistently to 1/10 of a dB for volume. And I know we discussed this with the pitch shifter, that if we add this, that it doesn't go down to 1 cent. But let's see if there's so it might be different for different values, but I could see if there's a way to, I don't know of one off the top of my head, to automatically set, let's say if we select that particular value, to change it with kind of a more fine resolution. But let's say if we come over here, so we could do it kind of based on cents or targets. Let's see if we, but I'll pass it along as a suggestion so that we could set particular values. But if you just let me know if you see that for all different plugins or just on pitch only. All right, and we see another question too. It's a pain to stop playback after punch out. All right, so I think there might be a preference for this that you could do. So let's say, all right, record audio. Let me just see. So maybe just stop after automatic punch out. So if you don't have that, there's two preferences here under record. So if you don't want to stop after the punch out, maybe if you just come right here and click on stop after automatic punch out so that you won't have to stop the playback after the punch out. So let me know if that works. My chat field just jumped. Sorry about that. All right, so I just see a question, Greg. Is it possible to show us how, by example, how to use OBS with Cubase to make tutorials? So I'm using OBS currently to do the stream, so I don't want to necessarily switch my OBS settings because that could stop the live stream from going on. But if you wanted to do it, let's say if you're in OBS, what you want to do is just set up your computer display as a capture, and then you could use your audio interface here for like your audio capture device. And at that point, if your audio interface has a loopback function, you could like I'm using a Steinberg UR24C. If it has a loopback function, you could actually connect a microphone and record the audio of that and have the audio spit out into OBS. Otherwise, you may have to do some other creative routing or different routing tools if your audio interface doesn't have a loopback. So I don't want to necessarily, not that I want to be difficult about it, but if I'm afraid I just don't want to cut off the live stream because I'm using OBS for the live stream itself. But I'm sure there's lots of tutorials. Maybe you could look on the Cubase Nation Discord with that. All right, and we have Brianna checking in from Youngstown, Ohio. And Gareth is saying the rain in Spain is mostly in his town of Bilbao. So, all right, so we have JV from Finland checking in, saying hello to everyone. All right, so just see a question. Native instruments, synths act strangely with the automation curves. Whenever I put in a value in the top editor, it jumps back to the maximum value. Is this a known issue? Okay, so I don't have any NI instruments to try here, but let's say if I have, I think I have a retro log here. So let's say if I just wanted to open up the automation track here. So let's say if I want to do like an automation curve. So let's say if I just want it to come here and kind of right in. So if that's what you're trying to do, that just kind of seems to work as expected. So I'm not sure when you say whenever I put a value in the top editor, it jumps back to the maximum value. So if that is in the automation line or maybe in a remote control script. So maybe if you give us a little more information, that'd be great. Okay, so I just see, hi, my Cubase 12 suddenly or maybe having disturbing sounds. Maybe, if it's like a buffer sound, like maybe like if the computer is working too hard, perhaps if you go to your audio interface and try to just adjust or raise the buffer size and see if that makes a difference. If you have a number of plugins on the track, you could try to also, maybe disable plugins. Maybe it's a particular plugin that's misbehaving. So let us know. Okay, so I see a question. It says, Greg, thank you for everything. When editing measure locations in warp mode, the bar numbers get way off until I reset the time base from bars to time code and then back to bars. I think it's a bug. All right, so let me just come over here and I'll just switch my warp mode to the warp grid. So as we do this, and I'll just open up a project where, let's say I was wanting to do some warping on for the bars. So if we want to warp the grid, let me just see. Okay, we'll take this project. So as I kind of come here, let's switch to our warp grid. So now I could just kind of move the grid lines here, and that seems to be kind of working as expected. So, but without having to switch to a different time base and then back. So let me know if I'm doing something different, and also make sure that you don't have free warp turned on, because if free warp is turned on and you're kind of moving stuff here, you could be just kind of stretching different materials. But if you jump back, make sure that you're in warp grid mode and that you actually are moving the measures as you see fit. But it seems to be kind of working as expected here. All right, so we have a question. How can I crossfade, let's say, 2 to 4 bars of audio, and when bounce it in place and have both heard with the same volume? The way it is set up now, by default, it deletes the on, under, mainly on drum editing. Okay, so let me just jump back here. All right, and I'm going to just revert this. Okay, so let's say if I have these two events here, and I'll just go ahead and duplicate, and let's say I'm going to crossfade, so that now when we solo this track, we'll have a drum loop that will crossfade into the drums. So that first one will start to fade out. Okay, so it says when I crossfade, say 2 to 4 bars of audio. When it bounce in place, have both heard at with the same volume. The way it is set by default, it deletes the on under. So let's say if I'm just going to now select both of the events, and let's do just, I assume when you say bounce in place, that maybe it's the bounce selection. There's also a render in place, but let's say if I just go to my audio and we'll do a bounce selection and replace the events, that now we could have kind of that seamless transition. So the crossfade was going to start right here. So it says 2 to 4 bars audio when bounce it in place have both heard with the same volume. The way it is set up now, it deletes the on under, mainly on drum editing. So one thing to check is, make sure that in your preferences, like if we do a crossfade here, we could, let's say if we adjust this, and we hit X, we could do just a crossfade. But if there's a preference check for delete overlaps, so if you come over here to the preferences and go to editing, if you have delete overlaps enabled, so let me just come over here. So now when we have the two events and we want to do a delete, so now if we do this, now that basically gets rid of the contents that are under. So maybe you have delete overlaps enabled, and then as you kind of drag one event over the other, those events will get deleted. So the overlapping regions will just delete as opposed to doing a crossfade. So maybe it's a delete overlaps function. All right, so we see one of the earlier questions continued. Says, I had to look at my Windows 10 system and can't find the media browser favorites file you mentioned. Would it be different in Windows? So it's probably going to be if you go to the Start menu, like at the bottom, and then you'll see all programs and go to Cubase, and you'll see like, Cubase 11, and then you'll see a user settings folder directly underneath that. Like instead of launching the program, if you go to the program group, and instead of launching the program, go to the user settings, and I think it's called user settings and data folder. This is kind of a difference in the two operating systems. So I can't really show it while I'm on Mac. But if you have that set up, I would try to go there, and I think you could find the Media Bay favorites file directly in there. So it's going to be kind of same general area, same general grouping, but a different way of getting it depending on your operating system. All right, so we just see how do we strum groups of chords in the MIDI editor, similar to what other programs can do. So let's say I'll just populate a couple of chords, but you could use the trim tool to do this. So let's say I will so I'm just going to drag these down to a particular part here. Okay, so if we wanted to do strumming on these, try just this little tool here called the trim tool and hold down the Alt or Option key, and then you could just kind of strum, and you could change the amount that you do. So if you want just a quick strum, you could just do stuff like that as well. All right, so we have Immersive Audio NFT checking in from Akron, Ohio. Thanks for joining us. All right, and we have Nithin Abraham from Singapore. I used to work with a guy named Nithin. Thanks for joining us. I see Gareth is saying warp markers have been useful recently. All right. So I just see from Jazz Dude, maybe Greg could show us the famous quarter MIDI plugin. So let's say if I wanted to just come directly over here, we'll go to just a MIDI insert. And now what we could do is just kind of trigger different chords, and there's, you know, wonderful presets that you could use here. So let's say, okay, I just want to do like some different jazz chords. So at this point, as we play, I'm just playing single notes from my MIDI controller. And there's, you know, all sorts of different wonderful presets that you could really kind of use. Let's say, okay, I want to do a song builder. So you play one note and you could trigger different chords. And you could, you know, even come over here and learn particular chords that if you wanted to just directly for each particular note as you do, so you could just trigger those particular chords. So that's another great way of kind of building chords if you don't want to do the logical editor preset that we showed earlier. All right, so we see, Greg, please, would you give us a little overview of your Cubase to compare our sound library to yours to see if we have installed our library correctly? So I may have some other libraries installed on my system, but, you know, if we wanted to go to like loop libraries, I think most of these are standard with Cubase, like Bloom, Kaleidoscope, Dance Floor Tech, but, you know, this is kind of the ones I have installed. I may have some extras, but I think most of these are standard with Cubase. We may see like game sound effects that's part of Nuendo, but I think most of these, and Pro Sound Effects is also part of Nuendo and not standard with Cubase, but I think most of the rest of these are standard. But you could always just go to the Steinberg download assistant and look at all the content there and make sure that you have everything installed there as well. And that will give you a good idea of exactly what content is available and if you have it installed. All right, and we see that Tim from Mission Viejo is on the live stream. Thanks for joining us. And we see Gareth is saying that the multi-band phase correlation is his favorite meter inside of Supervision. All right, so we see a question. I haven't found an answer for a very long time. I would like to know each place that each musical instrument occupies in an EQ. You know, so it could be hard to actually determine. You could, you know, see like which notes are within an instrument range. But obviously EQ is going to be different than that. So let's say if we go to, we'll add an instrument track and let's just take a look at like Hallian Symphonic Orchestras, just so we could show this. So we'll add a Hallian Sonic SE. And so when we come here to, let's say, double bass, we could see the exact frequency range you know, here. So I'll just turn this up. So generally, you know, most like string basses, this will be the instrument range. But obviously, if we look at, you know, like an oboe or clarinet, will have less harmonic content, just the nature of the instrument. But when we play a low E string on a particular on a string bass, and we come over here to supervision, we can see that as we play this one particular note, we're not going to hear just the EQ frequencies. We see the overall harmonic overtone series. So you can see, even though that's like an E, a low E note on a bass, the overtones and the harmonics will still be represented on EQ. So, you know, we could see kind of the frequency range of the notes that the instrument plays, but if we do an EQ change, those EQ changes, you know, so we could see kind of like your fundamental frequency here. So let me just turn on. Okay, I'm just going to turn this on to all MIDI input. So, and I'll go down an octave. So here you can see kind of like your different frequency ranges here in the overtone series. So if you wanted to see this, so, you know, applying a channel EQ, you know, even though it's not the fundamental frequency of the instrument, if I come over here, you know, we can see that that's out of range of the instrument, range, but is still affecting the tone of the instrument. So that's maybe why you don't see like a default kind of EQ range. You can see what notes often the instruments are capable of producing, the range of the instrument, but the EQ could be completely different of that because of the harmonic overtone series of what's going on. Okay, so we have a question. Is it possible for two events to be mapped to a keyboard shortcut and execute in sequence, preferably 1 second apart? Example, MIDI CC followed by a track disable command, trying it with VE Pro. So sometimes what people end up doing, you know, and sometimes we could trigger macros, and macros could sometimes go faster than the particular function that we need it to do. So when we do a macro, let's say, like, you know, we showed some of the previous macros, like let's say just even kind of creating the root note to third that we just kind of made. Let me just select a MIDI event here. Okay, so it's a, you know, root note to major chord, that, you know, those functions can be done so fast within the macros. And I've been trying to get like a function for a pause. But what some people will do in creating a macro is just kind of do something like, okay, let's say between these two events, sometimes you could have it just kind of turn on and off different windows. So if you need to come over and let's say we go back to that root note, and for some reason we needed to pause this, like we could do maybe something like, okay, turn the transport on and off. So there's a couple of techniques that you could utilize. So let's say I just wanted to come here, and I just want to turn the transport on and off, like, you know, a bunch of times. So at this point, I could just choose to add, and at this point, by time this function happens and this window opens and closes a number of times, that this function may have enough time to execute. So unfortunately, there isn't like a pause for 1 second or pause for until function is done, but this could be a workaround to actually, maybe give you enough time to do a function. So you could just kind of open and close windows in the meantime. And if you do that enough, that might give you enough time. And, with this, you may want to just make sure that's an even number of times. So something that you open is closed. So, give that a quick try and see if you do that. But that's probably the best approach, is kind of tricking it by opening and closing in kind of an innocuous window in the background. All right, so we have Mary checking in from Amsterdam. Thanks for joining us. And we see Gareth apologizing for sending a bunch of tunes. And I just had kind of family and Easter stuff over the weekend, so I didn't get to them as much as did get a chance to do it. And then a bunch of work stuff popped up this week. So, but after Thursday, should be pretty free. All right, so we see question, Greg, I'm new to Cubase Pro 12, which I love. Where do I start to master the DAW? Should I read the manual or just watch videos on YouTube? I think, the manual, I think both methods are really viable and make sense. Sometimes you may read the manual and you're like, oh, okay, I don't want to necessarily, some people say I'm going to learn like every function, every menu option. So I'm a Cubase Jedi master and I know every single thing. How I would approach it is, I think watching a video is really helpful. Asking questions in the live streams is very helpful because you could actually ask your question and get an answer to your particular question. If you go to the Cubase Index site, there's hundreds of hours of live streams that you could kind of type questions and kind of, find that particular area quickly. So I would just simply, try to figure out what you want to accomplish. Take a little chunk at a time. Learn the keyboard shortcuts as you go along, because using the keyboard shortcuts, once you get that muscle memory, that will really speed up your workflow. And just say, today I'm going to learn vocal tuning, or I'm going to learn how to use the drum editor. I'm going to learn how to get something done in Groove Agent. And I want to accomplish this one thing, and I want to be fast, so that as I go through this process, depending on the type of work you do, learn a little bit of chunks, and try to learn it. Think of it, you're learning basically, a new musical instrument, your DAW. Hans Zimmer is always the first, if you ask Hans Zimmer what instrument he plays, he would probably tell you the computer, or he plays Cubase. And it's like, learning how to play piano, learning how to play guitar. It's, if you take the same approach of learning a musical instrument as learning Cubase, then you're going to be in good shape. So you could use the manual as a reference, but the manual will tell you what things do, but it may not give you the practical application of how to apply that function to a workflow. So sometimes using the videos to expose yourself to see what Cubase can do and what type of workflow functions it offers is really helpful. And then maybe you could use the manual as an additional reference to, oh, there's an additional button here. Why would they put that in the program? And then figure out why, that function is needed, why that function was created. So I would do kind of a combination, but watch lots of videos. When I was first learning, like when I was learning how to play bass when I was, 13, 14 years old, I wish we had all the YouTube tutorials and learning how to play, and watching Jeff Berlin, give you a free masterclass on YouTube. I remember having to drive hours to go meet him to see him perform and play for him. But to have that level of availability is really great. So I would take advantage of that. All right, we have Trond checking in from Norway. Thanks for joining us. All right, and we have Hans checking in from Bergen in Norway. Thanks for being a part of the community today. All right, so we see, is there a note repeat function in Cubase? I was wondering about this for a while now. So you could actually do, there's note repeat. If you're looking for kind of more of an MPC styled note repeat, we could do that within, and it's kind of one of the instruments sold separately. But if we go to Groove Agent, the full version, we get the SE version with Cubase, but we could come over here to Groove Agent SE. So let's say I just wanted to come over here, and now we could go to the performance, and this would give you note repeat functionality here that you could just trigger from different MIDI notes. But if we wanted to also, there's like a little MIDI delay function as well. So if you wanted to just say, okay, I want to take this snare. If you go to the MIDI inserts, we could just say, let's come over to MIDI echo. And at this point, we can say, so we could have this kind of automatically align to different beats. We could choose to not do pitch offsets. So let's say if we just wanted to go to like a 16th note, echo, we could just kind of set up, different, presets just kind of like this. So check out like the MIDI echo plugin if you wanted to do stuff like that, and sometimes, different controllers. We could just come over here. So let's say, okay, now I want this to be like an 8th note delay. And we could set up more repeats. We could have these do pitch offsets for each one. So say if I just wanted to come here and put a MIDI echo. So let's say, okay, I want this to be 32nd notes. So anytime I hit one particular MIDI note, we could just have that automatically. So let's say, okay, I want this to be 16th notes, and I wanted that to be more repeats. And you could also have the delay just get, do a decay. So you could kind of check out some of the MIDI echo plugins if you don't have the full version of Groove Agent. But if you want kind of like a very much of like, an MPC style note repeat function, you could just do that in the full version of Groove Agent as well. All right, so we see a question. I got Elements and would like to upgrade to 12, but it's so expensive. Any discounts for an 70-year-old man? So generally, we don't do discounts based on age, but there will be different promotional periods. Like currently, we're in a spring sale, so you could get different virtual instruments, as well as I think Spectral Layers and VST Connect Pro at a discount. So, throughout the year, every month, there's different sorts of promotions going on. So there will probably be a promotion that happens for Cubase, so maybe upgrade or update at that point. So. All right, so you see Mikkel says, thanks for the help on the drum group editing. Everything's working now, so it's great. And I think it's from the last live stream we did on Friday, so thanks for letting me know. Okay, so I just see using the MIDI remote tab, setting up my I/O station. Can't find a start-stop pull down in button assignment. So one of the things that you could do is just, so let's go ahead and take a look. So we'll go to our MIDI remote. And as we come over here, let's say, okay, I'll just add some new knobs in my Nectar here. So let's say if I want to, I'll just make this a little larger, and I'll just add some knobs for my particular button. So let's say I'm just going to put a button here for start stop, make it a little larger. So okay, so I just added like my drum pad. So if I wanted this, okay, so when we want to go to our mapping, so let's come right over here to the mapping assistant. So I want to have this particular button do start stop. So, and you could probably just go probably under transport. Let's see if there's just the, let's go to key commands to transport. And then you'll see start stop here. So I'm going to go ahead and apply that mapping. So as I hit that button, it will, and now stop, continue, etc. So just go to the mapping assistant and under key commands, go down to transport, and then you'll see start stop. It just goes alphabetically. You could also just type in start stop right there and then assign that particular function. So let me know if that helps. All right, my chat field jumped on me, so let me just find where I was. Bear with me just for a second. All right, so we have Ricardo Red from St. Louis, Missouri. Says, thanks for all the info. It's all valuable. He's running Cubase 11 Artist and Windows 10 with the Dell Precision 68. You've already answered a lot of my questions. Staying tuned, so thanks for joining us. And if you reach out to Walter Blackledge, who's also on the live stream, he's part of there's a user group that meets in St. Louis. So maybe Walter could give you some more information on how to get in touch with the group. All right, so we see MK checking in from the UK, and we see Marcos Gomez from Brazil, I believe, if memory serves. Thanks for being on the live stream today. So we see Greg. What is the question? What is the best DAW in your opinion? So I think Cubase or Nuendo, depending on your workflows. If you're just doing music production, I think Cubase is more than sufficient. If you want to do more media production, where you're doing post production and game audio, then that functionality, the Nuendo functionality that's added in addition to all the Cubase, is a wonderful tool for that. All right, and we have Nairobi, Kenya checking in. Thanks for joining. Okay, so we see question. I'm new to Cubase. Where should I go for the best e-learning content apart from the Cubase website? So you could check out, obviously, like, going through these live streams, I think is useful. So a lot of people find that useful. There's lots of, check out, I think it's, there's lots of different kind of, very Steinberg focused YouTube channels. And I think that's a great way to learn. And just being on the live stream here, I think, is probably a very useful and helpful thing for seeing different ways of working with Cubase that you may not, I think a lot of people learn from other people's questions, and maybe they didn't I see how, see a different approach and see how someone else works with the program. All right, we have Audio Sound Doctor checking in from Kosovo. Thanks for joining. All right, we have Nick joining us, saying hi to the Cubase family. And we see Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas. All right, so I just see, can you create MIDI strumming guitar by dragging MIDI notes? So you could definitely do that. So if you wanted to, I'm not sure if it's the same as in other programs, but if we have, let's say, our chord. Oh, that's just a lovely interval. All right, so let's say. So, if we wanted to just kind of come here and slightly, drag the MIDI parts, but again, just being able to just grab the actual trim tool while holding down like the Alt or Option key is kind of a very fast method if you want it to be shorter, longer, whatever you wanted to set up for your trim as well. So all right, so we see a question. After creating a new track version of the drum tracks, I tried to free warp on the newly created version and it wouldn't let me. I had to free warp on the original track. Is this correct? So let's give it a shot. I'll just revert to this project here to where we started off. Okay, so let's say I'm going to create a new track version. We'll duplicate the version. And let's say we'll come over here and do free warp. So I move this around on this particular version, and let's jump back to our original version. So it looks like we could do warping changes independently between two different track versions. So if I wanted to come here, we'll just make that really obnoxiously. So now we come right over here, and even though it's the same audio file, we could have warping on the duplicated track version and keep the original intact. So it seems to work for me. Let me know if I'm doing something differently. And that's also with Cubase 12. Might be different in with Cubase 11, but Cubase 12, there's a lot of new functions for warping. All right, we see Michael Teams has started dispensing virtual ice cream for everyone. Okay, so question, can you automatically delete overlaps in MIDI? I believe so. So as soon as you just have the delete overlaps function enabled, so let's say if I come and I'll just delete this. Okay, so let's enable in the preferences, delete overlaps. Okay, so now as soon as I drag this over, the event is deleted. So if I drag this over the top of the other event, the events will be deleted. So yes, you could just set it up using the same exact preference. So under editing, just choose to delete overlaps. All right, so I just see a question. Greg, when I connect my guitar with the distortion effects, it generates a lot of noise. How to avoid this? When I watch guitarists on YouTube, they don't have this problem, even though they use distortion effects. So I would say most of the time, if people... you know, it could be the gain structure. So I'm not sure when you say a distortion effect, if it's a software effect or a hardware effect. So sometimes it might be the wrong impedance if it's a hardware distortion effect and you're going in, but I'll play you just a track here, but it could be just kind of basic gain structure. And make sure that, like, when you're going into your guitar input of your audio interface, if you're going straight in, try to go into, you may have to adjust the impedance of the input so that as you're working that it's recording at the right level. So you may see like a high Z switch, but I'll just give you an example here. Like these guitar parts in this project are just going straight. I know you're looking good. So these are all just going into the software VST amp rack that comes with Cubase. So if we wanted to bypass these, so that's our so there's no, I mean, you'll have distortion but not noise, but check just to make sure that the gain structure of your input isn't adding a lot of noise. If you're connecting the distortion pedal directly to the input, that may not give you kind of the best sense because the Often distortion pedals are designed to be run in an effects loop or going into a guitar amp for the right level, but it doesn't seem to be additional noise when doing that. So check those things. And if you let us know if it's software or like a hardware-based distortion, that'd be helpful. All right, we have Michael Pierce joining us from London. Glad you could join us for the live stream. Thank you. Okay, so just seeing this might be a continuation maybe with our drum recording question. It says, what I mean is, so the question is, let's say I record drums to the chorus, then stop when the fill ends. I want to record from the chorus, but have the tom cymbals ring underneath into the chorus to sound natural. So if you wanted to do something like that, probably what you'd have to do is to take like all of your drums and just, because there's going to be one sound on an audio track at a time. You could record directly after and then kind of blend the two in and crossfade. But if you wanted sounds to ring out from the first one, probably what you would do is, like, if I had all of my drums, I would put them into a folder track. And at this point, I would choose to duplicate the tracks, and we could duplicate and get rid of the events. And then as you record, you have this event kind of hanging. You could have the top track. Let's say, you go to the chorus here. And if you wanted those particular drums, to keep ringing and record on this, just simply duplicate the tracks, and that way it's going to ring while this one continues to play. And we could think of it kind of like, there's going to be one sound on the track at a time. You could do a crossfade, or just, since there's unlimited tracks, just simply duplicate the tracks. And if you wanted to have two different parts going on at once to overlap, you could just have them on different tracks. So you could put them all into a folder, right click that folder, and then duplicate. And then just record on both group tracks at once. All right, so we see Sergo Casimir checking in, American Boys Entertainment checking in. So thanks for joining the live stream today. All right, so we see a question. Hi, how to expand or shrink MIDI notes other than doubling them in the logical editor presets? So if we have, let me just jump to project with some MIDI notes in it. There's a number of different ways. So let's say if I just come here, let's say we have, all right, so let's say if I wanted to select all of these notes, and we'll go full screen here. So if I select all of the notes, we could just resize all of the notes. Just, once they're all selected, we could resize all of the notes like that. If we wanted to kind of take like the whole event, we could choose to do sizing applies time stretch. So I could say I need those same notes to fit into that amount of space or into that amount of space, and that will time compress the events within the MIDI part just like that. But you could also just select all the notes and just simply adjust if you wanted to all these notes to be longer or shorter, or if you wanted the whole event to be longer or shorter. just switch the object selection mode here to sizing applies time stretch. All right, so we see question, is it possible to update 12 to program Cubase for live performance using the new MIDI mapping feature? So if we have a project and we wanted to go to the MIDI remote, you know, we could, if we have stuff that are set up like in arranger chains, so let's say, you know, we could come over here, let's get to the key command, and you go to the arranger track, and then you could have up to 20 different arranger tracks that could be triggered from MIDI notes. So when you hit a MIDI foot switch or a MIDI controller, it could immediately go to different arranger chains. So once we select the event here, you could go to the mapping assistant. You could also open the mapping assistant here. So again, key commands to arranger, and then you could assign different keyboard shortcuts to 20 different arranger chain events within a project. So you could do that for live use very easily. All right, reading through. All right. So just see, please make DOP preview post clip gain. So let's go ahead and I'll just take a look at that. So let's come over here. We'll activate this project. Okay, so let's say if we have our clip gain down, so let's say this project here, so we listen to our drums. So let's say now we'll do let's do a process. So let me just we'll just reread this. So make the preview post clip gain. So all right, so let's say we just come over here, we'll do flanger on it. Okay, so I'm going to just, so we'll just come over here and we'll do the audition. So I will have the flanger. All right, I'm going to select the event. Just okay, so I see where that's probably, but let's say if we do the apply, and now we listen to it. All right, so I see the difference there. I'll go ahead and make sure to mention that and to the development team. So thanks for letting us know about that. All right, so we have Dan Freeman checking in from Atlanta. Thanks for joining. All right, so we have just a question, how to open and close a plugin from a specific mix console insert slot with MIDI remote. I can do this with generic remote, but I can't find this function in the MIDI remote. So currently not every function from the MIDI remote is in a generic remote, which is why the generic remote is still part of the program. So that's why, you know, we will see all of the functions coming from the generic remote in the new MIDI remote, but again, realize that it is the first implementation of it. All right, so question 2, is Steinberg going to remove the generic remote setup from Cubase? If so, can you please add MIDI remote to all the functions that are in generic remote? Also, the window in the pages. So yeah, that's the intention. So they wanted to get kind of the vast majority of features that people are utilizing. And that's why the generic remote is still part of the program. And we also didn't want to just take it away because, you know, people have invested lots of time mapping different control surfaces with generic remote. So we'll consider kind of a transition period. Okay, so we see a question, just starting with Cubase, does it cost me more if I buy a lower level product, for example, Artist, and upgrade to Pro down the line? I'm coming from Logic, so hoping that gives me a slight discount. So you could definitely, you know, you're not going to pay more. So, you know, you could start off with a Cubase Elements or Cubase Artist, and at that point just simply upgrade to the full version, and you don't lose, there's no financial consequences of that. So that will, you know, and if you do that in conjunction with promotions that come up throughout the year, you may be able to save a little bit of money. So. And we also see just a further comment about the generic remote. It says, generic remote is essential to my workflow. So yeah, Steinberg realizes that, and that's why it's still a part of the program. So we see a question from Sergo Casimir. His question is there anyone who makes money with the help of Cubase live performances? So I think Hans Zimmer is a good example of that. So you could, you know, they're using Cubase for a lot of their different stuff for their live show, which is probably the most complex live show I've ever seen. So. Okay, so we have a question. Can you please show the signal flow in a channel strip? For example, does the sound go through the EQ before it goes through insert plugins? Thank you once again. So when we go to our channel strip plugin, you know, we could change, you know, we could think of the signal flow as kind of being from left to right. So so here in this example, we would have the pre section, even though it kind of visually looks like it's part of the EQ, this comes before everything. Then we're going to have the inserts and our channel strip. In a channel strip, we could come over here, we have the noise gate, a compressor, you know, different functions. We could change the signal flow order of each of these elements. But if I wanted the channel strip, including the EQ, to come before the inserts, and let's say after the pre-section, at this point, we could just click right here, and then we can move the channel strip to come before the inserts. So if we just kind of see this little icon here, we could change the signal flow order of the channel strip to come before the inserts, and that would include the EQ, or we could have the inserts come before the channel strip. So it's flexible in that you could change the signal flow routing that way. All right, so just wondering, question, just wondering, I'm also a beginner sort of, what would a shortcut macro for the Stream Deck also be something to go for to start? Slideshow Effects has such a thing. Any users here? Yeah, you could definitely use the Stream Deck. I think I bought the Slideshow Effects and it caused all sorts of problems, so I actually kind of remapped every menu in Cubase for my Stream Deck. But you could definitely give that a try, and that helps a lot of people. But I think if you just teach yourself 3 shortcuts, 5 shortcuts a day, and that would get you probably a lot faster up and running than you relying on a Stream Deck. And so I think that would be faster, so you could give that a try. All right, so we have Audio Sound Doctor just saying hi once more from Kosovo. Thanks for joining us. And we have Charles K on the chat. And we have Stefan from Sweden. All right, sorry, my chat field just jumped on me. All right, so we see a question. Is there a Cubase user group in the UK? So I know I'm not sure if there's one based in the UK. I mean, we do this twice a week, and we used to do lots of kind of live get-togethers, and those kind of had stopped during COVID. So I'm not sure if there's anything in particular going on in the UK. Maybe if there's someone who knows, but we do this for 8 hours a week as well. All right, so we see question, Greg, do the developers plan to develop Cubase for live performances? So, there's lots of people already using it for lots of live performances. I know it doesn't have like a clip-based launcher like some other programs, so I haven't heard of any plans or, I'm not in discussion of those things, but they're obviously aware of the desire for that. Okay, so we just see a question. Which process uses the most CPU resources, audio or MIDI? So it could really depend. If it's a very simple synthesizer, MIDI itself doesn't take, is very small bandwidth. It sends a note on, note off message. Audio is going to play back a file. Now, a MIDI track that's routed to a very CPU-hungry virtual instrument could take a lot of CPU resources, but MIDI routed to a very simple instrument may not take a lot, but an audio track that's routed through 16 plugins may take a lot of different audio, may take a lot of CPU performance. So, if it's just MIDI going to an external device, that's, very small compared to audio. But if it's going to an instrument, it really depends on the processing, and the capabilities of if you're using virtual instruments. Okay, so I see a question. Why do all my native instrument plugins appear as very small screens in Cubase 12? They was large in Cubase 10. So it's probably, you might have to go, my guess is that they're not high DPI compatible. So if you wanted to go to general, you may want to just, on the Windows platform, you'll see enable high DPI. So you may want, and there's different scaling options. You may want to adjust that, but also make sure that your native instruments plugins are high DPI compatible. So it's probably a limitation of the plugin. All right, we see Robbie Bowling checking in from Dallas, Texas. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we see question. Hi, Greg. I have an 1.5-hour file that I want to add markers to turn into CD track markers. Is there a way to do that in Cubase, or is that for Wavelab? That's going to be more of a Wavelab functionality, and realize that if you have an 1.5-hour audio file, that's not going to fit onto a traditional CD. I think the limitation is 74 or 78 minutes. So there's a good chance that an 1.5-hour audio file won't fit onto a standard Redbook CD. Just be aware of that. But that would be kind of a Wavelab functionality for the mastering and CD preparation. All right, and we have Nicholas Carlson on the live stream, so thanks for being part. All right, we have Captain Energy Music just joined us, getting through, just got through a meeting. So I have so many meetings in a week I have to go through. Okay, so I just see a question, trying to go DAW setup together, and was wondering whether I could repurpose my old HDR for capturing audio live and then move the audio files to Cubase for mixing, etc. So I'm not sure if it's an Alesis HDR, which is kind of like the 24-track recorder. So you could definitely, take, if it's one of those devices, or an MX2424, I think it was a Tascam version of that you could be able to just take those audio files directly out of the unit and just import it directly into Cubase if you don't want to use it as your if you want to go DAW-less for tracking. All right, so we see question. Greg, would you quickly go over how to set up a QMix for headphones separate from the main control room out? Okay, so let's say we want to set up different headphone mixes for a group here. So let's say we'll go to our mix console. I'll go ahead and activate this project. And thanks for all the wonderful questions from everyone. And if you've learned something new, make sure you do hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that. And again, we do these live streams on Tuesdays and Fridays starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. We usually go for about 4 hours until we answer everyone's questions. All right, so let's say we want to set up, we're doing a tracking session and we want to have and let's say we're doing bass overdubs and drums and guitars, and we want to do just a quick headphone mix. So we listen to, let's say, our mix. So the easiest way to do this is when we go to the control room, we could have kind of different functions in the control room when we come over here. So I'm going to go to select the control room. And in our main mixer, we could go to our racks, and we want to make sure that the cue sends and that the cues are active. I'm going to just hide my input channel. So let's say I want to set up different cue mixes for different musicians. So I want to, again, come here. Let's go to my audio connections, and we're going to set up our cue mixes in our control room. So let's say I want to have this set up as drums. I will add another cue mix. So we'll just say, okay, we'll add a cue, and let's say this will be for bass. And let's add one more cue mix, and we'll add our last cue mix, let's say, for our guitarist. Okay, so ideally what we want to do is to take our outputs here to outputs on our audio interface that can then feed distinct separate outputs that would feed into a headphone output on your audio interface, or take the stereo line out and feed it into the to a headphone amp system. So now we have our cue. So what I want to do is we'll go over to our control room. We'll just go right click on our general area and say we want to right click here, and let's go to all cues. And first thing I want to do is I'm going to select all of my channels. Let's say I take all of my tracks here, and then right click, and we'll say let's go to all cues. And first thing I want to do is to activate the cue sends across all the channels. And maybe I want it to also use the current mix levels, because we probably may want to build like a more me headphone mix. And let's also use the current pan settings. Okay, so what we want to do now is I'm going to select my drums, and I'm going to put this into quick link. And I'm going to say we're going to send more drums to the drummer's headphone mix. Let's send more bass to the bass player's headphone mix. And let's send more guitar to the guitar player's headphone mix. So as we are playing in our project, we come here. So let's go to cue mix 1. And then as we So once we have this, then we could just simply select. So that's our bass. Let's say this is our drum headphone mix. You know, our bass. So now our bass player can hear more of himself. Our guitar players can hear more of themselves. And let's say, okay, the bass player wants to hear more kick drum. I could just take the kick drum here and send this to the bass. So let's say I just want to take these particular channels here. So we can feed these. And you could have different cue mixes set up just like that. And those will be independent of the control room mix. So if I just wanted to go back, it's like listen to bass, cue mix, guitars, and let's listen to our control room just by clicking there. All right, so it's just the question, installed Cubase 12 on Catalina and it worked fine. Then I upgraded to Monterey and I can't open Cubase anymore. I can't even open the download or license managers. What can I do? So I would try just to reinstall the, I would, obviously after kind of going to, was that 2 different operating system jumps that you may have to reinstall stuff. So I would download the Steinberg download assistant again, reinstall that, and then perhaps go through reinstall Cubase again as well. So I think that once you do that you should be okay. But realize that, when you jump like a couple operating systems, there may be consequences with that. So, but try just to download the Steinberg download assistant and then re-download and reinstall, and I think you'll be okay. All right, John Costigan says, if you've learned something, caress the like button. So some people want you to smash it as long as you hit it an odd number of times. All right, so you see Jazz Dude just saying since Cubase 12, he's now using Cubase on 3 PCs at the same time. He's a happy Steinberg fan. That's great. I know you had some reservations, Jazz Dude, about the new licensing system, but I'm glad that it's working out for you. Captain Energy Music says, caress the like button is the favorite way he's ever been asked to click like. So thank you, John. Okay, so we just see question, is there a way to quantize the points of automation curves as it does not snap at creation, but only when dragging? I have a bit of a hard time adjusting the points. So, it's not going to, I don't think most people would want the quantize to snap, they want the quantize, or they want automation to occur exactly where they hit it, whether it's on a grid or not. So let's say let's just go ahead and create some quick automation points here very quickly. Okay, so let's say I'm not sure if automation points will snap, but let's just enable. So snap is turned on, and let's say we have it set to bar, that as we move. So right now it looks like it is snapping only to the grid that we have set here. Let me just make sure. So it's not necessarily going to quantize, because it's not MIDI data per se, but you could have it, like here, I set my snap on and we set the grid to bar, and we could also do that if we set this to beat. And I will go ahead and just kind of zoom in. So now as I move this, we can't go in between the beats. And once we set this up, if I set that to bar, at that point, it's only going to allow us to put it from measure 13 to measure 14 or to measure 12. So give that a shot and let me know if that works for you. Okay, so you just see question. We get Halion Sonic SE with Cubase, but what's the additional benefits of Halion Sonic Full and Halion 6? What do you get for the price? You get a lot more sounds. You get stuff like the Flex Phraser, and that's with Halion Sonic, so more libraries, more content. With Halion 6, you also get the ability, it's kind of a whole suite for creating virtual instruments where you could sample directly in. So if you are wanting to just looking to expand your palette of sounds, consider Halion Sonic. And if you wanted to create your own instruments and sample instruments directly in, that's what Halion 6 is really great for. All right, so we see Soren from Sweden joining us, and he's on penicillin today, so he's a bit under the weather. So we hope you get better soon. But thanks for joining us and popping in. We hope you have a speedy recovery. All right, so we just see, will you be talking about recording with VST Connect today? So yeah, let me just find my spot. Okay, so let's talk about doing some VST Connect while we're here. So let me get this kind of set up. All right, so VST Connect, if you wanted to record, someone remotely, that's what VST Connect will allow you to do. Now, there's two different parts of the software. One will be the VST Connect that comes within Cubase. And there's a VST Connect SE and a VST Connect Pro. And some of the differences between SE and Pro, SE, we could think of that as maybe starter edition. SE, and we could find these in the VST Cloud menu. VST Connect SE will allow you to record up to 2 channels at once. VST Connect Pro will allow you to do up to 16 channels, and data can be buffered on the host computer and then transferred over to the main computer if it's not, if the bandwidth isn't sufficient. And you could also record directly with MIDI information. So if we wanted to do this, and VST Connect Pro, we could actually record on the same network. So if you have multiple facilities in your room, so I'm going to open up a quick VST Connect, and we want to make sure that the person you're recording gets a program called VST Connect Performer, and that's a free download for Mac or PC. And I think if you're on iOS, I think it's $5 in the App Store. So what's going to happen is basically you could come over here, you log in with your My Steinberg credentials. You could find your friends. So if you want to do recording directly here. So I'm going to go to my other computer here, and I'm going to accept kind of the friend request. All right, so now what's happened is, let me get my bass on and plugged in. Give me just a second. And if you wanted to see like a webcam of the person, if you have webcams on both computers, you could see each other. And, that way if someone is singing into the back side of their microphone, you could see kind of what's going on. So with this, what you at this point want to do is we need to set up a Q mix, and this will be kind of set up by default. When we come over here to we'll say, create VST Connect, and that will activate the control room and send everything out through it. So right now when I play my bass, we're listening to the performer computer is what is being, so the performer computer is the person that you're recording, and you have the VST Connect on your system. Now, realize that from when you send the audio track, let's say this groove agent, I'll hit play. And now as we play this particular track, this is now going to be sent over to the musician. But it's going to be a little bit delayed. So if I wanted to bring in the sound that the musician is hearing, we could hear this delay. So if I play my bass, so you could hear my bass strings probably hit on the microphone. I'll put my bass acoustically near the microphone. All right, so we could hear that that's going to be out of time. So if I'm recording, it's going to compensate the latency. So I'm going to mute my studio recording computer and just listen to the track that's going to be on the VST Connect here. So now as I hit record, So everything is on time on this end as the recorder, as the musician. All right, so now when we come over here, so we could just record. If I hit record correctly this time, that would be helpful. So when we want to just record, so let's say I just come over here and I bring in what the studio is going on. This is going to be delayed, but it's really, so this is what's going on in the monitor, the recording engineer side. And I'm just going to kind of take the fader up, and this is what's going on in the actual musician, what they're hearing. But as they record in, everything is delay compensated. So at this point, you know, what you have to do is to take all of the tracks and make sure that they're going out of the Q mix. So, and those tracks that are being sent out of the Q mix get sent to the musician in their performer software. And all you have to do is hit record. So it's going to be, and as you hit record here, you may notice that it's going to be slightly delayed. Like as I hit play, because that's compensating for the latency of the signal going out to the musician, and we would see them in the VST Connect window. And we could also just come over here if they needed to monitor with effects or compression or EQ, that we could just record directly and do settings here. So if the musician isn't very comfortable with like recording studio terminology or setting up, all they really have to do is to set up their instrument or their microphone into an audio interface, and you could reach out to them and connect, and you could actually come over here and just kind of set up the remote system. So if you go to the setup, you can say, okay, here I'm going to set the audio interface for the musician. And at this point, we could set the buffer size. And if you have the VST Pro, you could just come directly over here and set the MIDI input or output. You could see the video if you wanted to. And with the Pro, you could also just now at this point transfer the recordings if necessary. But this allows you to remotely collaborate. But the signal, once you go to the VST Cloud, you want to just say, create VST Connect. And that will create everything that you need to for all the setting. The audio goes out through the control room, and that is what is transmitted directly to the performer. And by the time it gets sent out, it automatically determines the latency of the path. And just because we're using the internet for all of the connections, at that point, as the performer hears his latency with the tracks in time, it is then recorded directly back into the system on the main recording engineer side. So if you're doing a quick VST Connect SE, it's also really good because perhaps you don't want the musician to actually have the audio files or have access to them. So if you're using just the VST Connect SE, at that point, the musician never has the audio files. They hear it and they're tracking through headphones. You could have different headphone mixes for the particular musician, and you could record them from remotely from wherever they are in the world. So that's how you could kind of get set up with the VST Connect SE. All right, let me put my bass down. Give me just a minute. And we'll move on to the next question. Thanks for all the great questions again. All right, so just see question. I'm still using Windows PC i7 4th generation, 32 gigs of RAM with separate SSDs for plugins and VST. Why sometimes it hits the audio overload process? It's only a few MIDI tracks with plugins. So really, see, first thing that you would want to do is make sure that, if you're having like audio overloads, it could be just that your buffer size needs to be increased. So see if adjusting your buffer size up will make a difference. When you say just a few plugins, some plugins may be like, like multiple instruments stacked within one particular plugin. So depending on the preset that you're using, or like, I just saw on Facebook some guy, posted that, when he did, he plays his drum tracks back. It's just drum tracks with a couple of plugins that was, totally killing his CPU. And he realized that, he put like a channel strip plugin on all of his drum tracks. And then once he turned that off, it was that one particular plugin that wasn't, that was killing his CPU. So it could really be, and one of the things that you could check is if you just open up your performance meter, and then you could just disable tracks. So if you just say, okay, I want to disable the selected track, see if, when you disable the selected track, just look at your performance meter, and then you could see if one particular plugin is causing a lot of CPU performance. So check that out. So, if it's a very simple synthesizer, or if you're running something like Omnisphere or Halion Patch that has 16 different voices layered together, that could take a lot of CPU cycles. So you could probably figure it out just kind of, seeing what particular instrument, what is making up the sound in that particular instrument. All right, so we see Cashmere Cat says I upgraded from Cubase Pro 11 to Pro 12. Buffer size is 512, 48K. So, in this continuation of the question, so see if you change the buffer size up, if that makes a difference. So in the last question regarding this, is Cubase more suitable on Mac or Windows base? So either one works fine. Cubase is M1 native, but a lot of third-party components are not. So you may not get the full benefit of being M1 native, but I go back and forth between Mac and PC, and I don't see like a huge difference. I don't have an M1 Mac, but it runs great on either platform. It's not written on one and ported to the other. And Captenergy Music's also saying either OS is fine with Cubase, and he uses both as well. All right, Michael Pierce has countered Michael Teens' ice cream with his soup selection. So it's steep kombu with vegetable stock. We use dashi, boil, soak wakame seedweed, drain, add to bowls, take stock off boil, remove kombu and miso paste, 20 grams per bowl, add tofu, scallions, and enjoy. Sounds good. Just reading through more questions. All right, so I just see I got my studio and I want to start producing my songs on Cubase 5. We'll check out definitely later versions. So, we're up to version 12. So if you just got your studio, consider getting Cubase 12. So. All right, so just the question from Julian from Paris, or Julian. Do you know if it's possible to keep the effects and group channels on the main arrangement window when we click on Show Data Between Locators? Thanks. Okay, so let's give it a shot. All right, so let me just revert this and I'll put locators and let me add a group channel and an effects channel here. Okay, and I'll just go ahead and let's create some markers. Okay, so let me just okay, so see, keep the effects and group channels on the main arrangement window when you click on Show Data Between Locators. Okay, so let's say if we do this. All right. All right. So let's see if we put in like an automation point between them in the locators. So let's say show data tracks between locators. Yeah, so I think because, those, the logic is, is going to be basically that there's no actual events. And these are, when you tell it to show tracks, for events, so you might be able to set up like a project logical editor preset. Let's see if we can do a project logical editor preset for this. Okay, so we'll say media type is, we'll say container type is equal to folder track, or we'll say track. And we want to say the position. I think we'll say position is equal to inside locators. Okay, so let's say inside cycle range. Okay, so let's say if we hit apply. So let's say maybe inside cycle. So let's say if we select let me just try another approach to this. All right, so if we come over here, let's say maybe we could do like a two-step process. Okay, so let's say we want to show tracks. Just move this up a little bit. Okay, so we'll have that as our pre, and now we want to so we'll select inserts media type is equal to effect, or let's say group. And then we want to track operation. Okay, so let's see if we do this. Okay, so let's see. Come here, show all tracks. So let's say we want to do or. Yeah, so we could do that. And let me just go ahead and erase a track here just to make sure that that is. Okay, so what we did is we chose to take channel and track visibility. So we want to show between the locators. And then what we want to do is then we're going to say we want to take our effect and or group channels, and then we want to disable hiding those tracks. So this way we can, and I'll just, so come over here. So let's say we have our drum track. So now we see everything. Let's go ahead and run We'll show all tracks. So we'll go ahead and hit apply. So yeah, that will do the trick. So you want to do channel and track visibility as the pre command. Then, and you could save this as a preset. Media type is equal to effect or group. And then you want to hide tracks and disable. So I'll go ahead and save that in case we need this for a future. So say, so give that a shot, and I think that will do the trick. So, and if you don't have a Cubase 12, you might not be able to do that. You may have to do it kind of with the macro. All right, so hopefully that helps. All right. All right, so we see what are the basic rules I need to know before using Cubase 5. So realize that it is kind of a significantly older version. So I would definitely check and make sure that if you're getting a brand new Cubase setup that you're running Cubase 12. All right, and also just kind of see, respond to my question. Please realize that it takes a little while to for me to get to the parts, to get to the question. So, all right, so I just see multiple tracks with split. So, if we want to do this, I think if we just, let's say if we come here. So let's say if my cursor is right here, if we have everything in a folder, we could just split multiple events, but you could also just come here. And I think if we go, we'll just check my keyboard shortcut. But let's say if we go to edit functions, we could just split at cursor. So just, I think it's Shift X. Or Command X. Let me just get my modifiers right here. So or Alt or Option plus X. So instead of using the cursor tool, you could just move just come here, wherever your cursor is at, just hit Alt or Option plus X, and that will cut all of your different parts for you. So. All right, going through questions. All right, so you just see, hi Greg, I did instance of Omnisphere with 8 outs, and I was using 6 MIDI tracks into Omnisphere. I tried to render the MIDI tracks in place. I ended with 42 audio tracks. How do I get only 6 tracks? So if you're doing kind of render in place, I would start with using an instrument track as opposed to a MIDI track. So if you do a MIDI track, Cubase doesn't know within the instrument how it's allocating its outputs. But if you're doing it as an instrument track, it does. So once it kind of sends MIDI information, there's no way of Cubase for realizing, how the plugin is allocating its outputs. So you may get unnecessary duplicated outputs. So instead of missing outputs, Cubase may give you empty outputs because it just doesn't know within the instrument from a MIDI track where the audio output is. So quick remedy is if you're using it as a MIDI track, start using it as an instrument track. All right, so we have a question. I installed Cubase 12 on a computer. I returned. Can I deactivate my license on that computer? So if you didn't deactivate the license before the computer, you should reach out to Steinberg support and they could remotely deactivate it. All right. So I just see question from Best Korean Jesus. Is there any way to keep plugins open so I can drag samples from Windows Explorer, or should I stick to Media Bay? So let's say if I open up like an instance, just revert this quickly. So let's say if I have a groove agent here, and I will just put this to always on top. And let's say if I wanted to drag samples from this, you might have to, you know, we have kind of Windows allocation inside of Cubase, but if you go out of Cubase, you might, you know, run into different stuff, whereas you go to like your Explorer Finder, that some windows may disappear, and that could be kind of outside of Cubase. But, you know, consider using the, you know, the Media Bay, because, you know, you can quickly just kind of come right over here, go to media, to your file browser, and then you could just kind of drag and drop, you know, samples very easily and Audition just directly from there without having to go into Explorer or Finder. All right, my chat field jumped to me, so let me find my spot. Okay, so I think I'm in the neighborhood, or was. All right, so a question. Hello, in my project before to mix, how I have to do to clean all my old samples and recordings I don't need anymore. I've already deleted the track and I don't use. So just go to your media menu here, and you can see remove unused media, and then that should take it into the trash can. And then you could empty the trash and save the project. So just, or you could do that directly from within the pool window. So if you just wanted to right click here, you can remove unused media, and then we could remove it from the pool, place it in the trash, and then you could empty the trash. And at that point, if you want it to resave, there won't be references to unused audio files. All right, so you just see from P-Zone 36, it says, but sending MIDI messages to external instruments and capturing the audio offline. My laptop is dying with a few MIDI tracks. So generally, it's usually not the case. I mean, you know, we could do lots of MIDI tracks going back to, you know, Atari 1040 STs with 1 megabyte of RAM. So maybe there's something else with your system that's going on. All right, it's wonderful to see Sable Winters on the live stream. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. right, and we see it as this is dealing with machine. So I'm not sure. I don't have an instance of machine, but if it's actually running externally or if it's running as a plugin, yeah, I think it kind of may do both if you're dealing with, so I'm not sure if the machine is actually hosting the instrument or if it's being hosted on a computer. And the machine is like a control surface for that. See, Volker is just saying be sure to buy. So that's always a great suggestion, especially for everyone. All right, so we see John Shaman on. Thanks for joining us. So we see a question. Has anybody done the whole moving from PC to M1 Max since Cubase 12? What kind of issues are you having? Do your old songs, sample tracks, Groove Agent presets, key maps, presets all get converted over? So one of the things with, all of your Cubase setups and everything that you've done, if you export a profile manager from your PC and import that profile into your Mac system, then all of your Cubase settings will be carried over. I can't really speak for third-party plugins if they function the same way or are native on M1. You have to check with your hardware and third-party plugins. All right, so you see Matthew Ellison checking in from London and just says, hey, Greg, and all Cubase users and contributors, I really enjoy this live stream twice weekly. Thanks to all Make It So Great, learning so much. That's great. We're glad it's helpful and beneficial to users. All right, so I see a question. I wonder if you can answer a question. Cubase with VE Pro 7 routing. Use instrument tracks to connect both route. How can I save different Cubase projects with the same? So, okay, just continued. So with the same libraries, load it in VE Pro. Then when I switch projects, then load them. I wanted them to connect automatically, in other words, without having to connect every instance over and over again. So I don't have... I don't have a VE Pro license, so I'm probably not the best person to ask. I know other people on the live stream do. I think obviously with, I think a lot of people with VE Pro use MIDI tracks to get sent out to VE Pro as opposed to instrument tracks. But it should kind of stay open, I know that if you host everything in Cubase and you load a new project or new template, that you would have to, it will reload the particular instruments, but I think that's minimized with VE Pro 7, but I don't have a license, so I'm probably not the best person to respond to that, unfortunately. All right, so you see from Frequency, did a project with Cubase Perform. It worked like a charm once I get the hang of it. And Michael Pierce is saying he used VST Connect the first lockdown last year for remote mixing, worked like a charm. He says doing editing and mixing made life a lot smoother. So just see a question, and this was directed to Michael Pierce, but I could address it for the benefit of others on the live stream. So the question is, I was just thinking, what if we just wanted someone to hear what I'm doing live and not add anything? It could work as a high quality live stream. Say if I wanted input on a mix, yeah, so you could definitely do that. No problem. Okay, so we see this question: can you use any DAW like Pro Tools or Ableton Live to record in from? And also, can someone on the other side use their phone to connect to the engineer? So this is with the VST Connect. So it's going to be, it's not going to be like with Pro Tools or Ableton Live, but again, the VST Connect Performer software is free. So Pro Tools and Ableton Live just don't have that functionality for the remote recording to work with VST Connect Pro. So, and we see also, can someone on the other side use their phone to connect to the engineer? So there is like a VST Connect, like a producer version where another person could listen in and make comments as the producer. So you could look into that. All right. So you see comment, it would be great if Steinberg made a master out plugin that would send a live stream out at high quality, just to let other people hear what you're doing, like VST Connect, but a simpler version. So, it's really, once you get VST Connect set up once, you could do that very well. And I've used some of the other systems, and I think, VST Connect is kind of a better streaming quality for that. So it's pretty simple, that someone could just download it. You don't have to have a specific web browser that it works on and not others. So it's not a browser-based thing. So okay, so we have a question. Hi, I want to know if I'm doing, I guess, background BG music and my video length is 10 minutes and I used various tempo and time signatures. If I want to insert one video at the beginning, is it possible? So let's say, all right, so let's say if I have this project open and we have a tempo track. Right, so I'll activate my tempo track. So let's say I just have different tempo changes. All right. And let's say if we need to insert time, what you could do is, let's say, okay, I needed to insert, we have a large project here. I'm going to hold down Control and Shift and kind of grab my range selection tool, and that will globally select, like, let's say I needed to put in 32 measures and shift everything over to the right and keep the tempo changes. So if we come here, let's go to the edit and go to range, and then you can say insert silence. So then all of your tempo changes will be reflected afterwards. And you could just insert like a video and have all of the tempo changes kind of be independent and locked to where they were. So once you select the amount of time that you want to insert with the range tool, go to your edit to range and then choose insert silence, or Command plus Shift with the letter E. So let me know if I misunderstood. Are you just reading through comments? We see Jazz Dude owns a Casio MIDI guitar with a Casio synth built in. Really funny thing. All right. I remember those. And Michael Teams has an RZ1 Casio drum machine. Wow. We're going back to the old 80s here. Good times. All right, so we have a question from a Critical Hit Studio. Hi, noticed that since I upgraded to 12, VSTI data gets registered in the mix console history, like dynamics, expression maps. Would there be a way to deactivate this behavior? Okay, so let's go ahead and just open up a project that has some various articulations set up. All right, so let's say as I come over here and I want to start adding different articulations. So let's say we'll make this full screen and I'll just randomly draw in different articulations here. All right, and then when I go to my mix console, let's see if it's just articulations. So let's do dynamics as well. Okay, so I'll go to my mix console, and when we come to the mix console window, we'll come over to our mix console and let's go. We haven't really mixed any faders, and we go to the history. It's not showing up in the history there, but if we go to our edit history, here we can see all of the articulation showing up in the edit history, kind of as I would expect, but not in the mix console history. So if I wanted to switch over to the mix console, there's nothing to, when we go to our history here, that's not going to do anything. So we go to our editor, let's say on our violin one part, everything that we just did is still there. So it seems like it's still in the edit history to me, but let me know if I did something differently than you. All right, so we just see question. Hi, Greg. Thank you so much for doing these very valuable streams. Are you planning to continue those in the foreseeable future, or are these just temporary? Thanks and all the best. So we kind of ramped it up. We were doing it like once a month pre-pandemic, and it's because I would travel extensively. I was a guy that was, kind of like George Clooney's character and up in the air, flying constantly, and flight attendants recognized me. I didn't even have to show my ID at the airport. I flew so much, and I was doing 120,000 miles a year flying. But since pandemic started, obviously the travel has, ground to a halt. So I wanted to do something that was relevant. And we just kind of started our new fiscal year on April 1st. So just about, 2.5 weeks ago, almost 3 weeks ago. And for this upcoming year until at least April of 2023, we have very similar travel schedules and budgets that we've had for the last year. So I foresee continue doing this as long as people are watching and people are asking questions and attending. I think the response has been really good. We get lots of views, so I don't really, and I think it's a very effective way. We could reach 10,000 people a week doing this, or I could, spend a lot of time flying remotely and talk to 10, 20 people sometimes at a time. So I think this will be going on for the foreseeable future. So but if people stop watching, then it'll roll back. But if people keep watching, then I think we will continue, and I hope that's the case because I really enjoy doing this. And I think it's really beneficial for users. All right. So I saw a question I'd missed from Best Korean Jesus. Is it possible to always show audio waves in the events or set a default height for each track type? So jump back here. So let's go to this project, and we'll see if we see the waveforms. So let's see, as we go really small, we can do that. Let's see if there's a preference. All right, so let's see. So let's say if we show smallest track height to show data, we can say minimal. So say we hit apply here, and then we could adjust that. So we could see the waveform at the smallest size when we go to the preferences here and go to event display and smallest track height to show data. So I don't know if there's a default track size. It may just kind of take it from the previous track, but you could obviously kind of adjust that, but maybe you don't need to if you can see the waveforms at any size. So hopefully that helps. See a funny comment from Tron saying he worked from his kitchen home office during lockdown and gained 11 kilograms. So it's a problem of a kitchen office. Yeah, Michael Team says, another point about the live stream, so make sure that you do hit the like button. But, I think it's really beneficial. I think we're building a wonderful community, and I look forward to my Tuesday and Friday afternoons being able to do this. All right, so we just see, okay, so it says it would be great if there were more grid type value options like 50 milliseconds or 70 milliseconds. So, when we come here, so, I mean, I could pass that along, but, if there was maybe a user definable grid, I mean, so you could do intervals of 10 or 100 milliseconds, but I'm not sure how many people would use 50 or 70 milliseconds for grid editing purposes, but I could definitely pass it along as a feature request. Okay, so see, this may be our previous discussion on the with the articulations, if I make some tweaks in the mix and then use the mix console history to go back and A/B my mix decisions, the history gets erased by any MIDI / VSTI data happening during playback. So let's open up. All right, so I'll just do kind of a project here. We'll do mix console history, and let's see if we could replicate that. So let's go to Beatles or Stones. So we could do MIDI and audio here. Okay, so let's say we're just check my outputs here quickly. Sorry about that. All right, so let's say as we're all right, so let's say I write automation. All right, so now I just wanted to undo my history here, and we have lots of MIDI instruments going on, like all the drums. And as we so now even if I just come here and I move, let's say not even automating, so now let's say if I open up a plugin, and now let's go through our mix console history. So, I mean, there's like just a little hiccup when we're unloading plugins and it's resetting the delay compensation, but it seems like all the MIDI was playing back fine with that. So let me know if I'm doing something differently or misunderstanding. All right, so we see just a comment. If Cubase had a plugin, it basically sent out synced live stream with your monitor feed and video track. That would be amazing new plugin for Cubase 12.5. Hint, hint. Just steal the tech from VST Connect. So, transmitting your monitor feed may be tricky, but, we could do it with audio as well. But, I've kind of passed along similar suggestions already. See, Gareth is just say, the pandemic has been over 2 years now. Time flies. Yeah. All right. All right, so we have a question from Benny. Tricky question. Is it possible to get 2 external drum modules from different digital drum kits to send signals to the same MIDI channel? All right, so if you wanted to record both of them, so as you record MIDI in, you could if you have it set to all MIDI inputs, I only have one controller. But yeah, so, you could take two different MIDI controllers. Let's see if I have anything else that's kind of hooked up. So let's say I want to take my MIDI controller here, and I'm going to open up. So if it's on input, and I wanted to, so let's say, so my hi-hat is coming from my virtual keyboard. Let's say that's drum machine 1, and my snare is coming from my Nectar controller. So we could take both of these because they're set to all MIDI inputs, and Cubase will take different devices and even transmitting different channels output. And then it will, if we have set to in all MIDI inputs, at that point, it will kind of rechannelize all of the information to this particular MIDI channel. So if you wanted to have two different like electronic drum kits play the same kit simultaneously, you could do that quite easily. But you realize that as we record in, the MIDI channel is assumed to be whatever the channel is in the particular instrument or MIDI channel right there. So yeah, no problem doing that. So, but if I misunderstood, let me know. Okay, Michael Teams wants people to whack the like button. So you see Michael Teams. Actually, I was lucky I got to meet him, I think at Spunky's place in Dallas a number of times. Okay, my chat field just jumped on me. Just find my place. Okay. Okay, so we see from Greg Malik, Aloha, can a MIDI part be stretched or shrunk by a certain percentage? Okay, so let's see if we could do that here. So let's take this MIDI event. So let's try the Project Logical Editor. Just reread that, just to make sure. In a MIDI part. Okay, so let's come here. So let's try Project Logical Editor, and we'll say our so media type is equal to MIDI, and we want to come over here. We will say length. Let's multiply by 2. All right, so we have that event selected, and I will just come over here and say multiply by 2. So we could do that event. Now there's also, so that just changed the event. So let's say if we want to change the contents within the event. So I think that there are presets for this. Within the logical editor, but let's see, just the normal MIDI logical editor. So let's say, I think there's a double note lengths. Let's try note positioning. So I think that there is a, sorry for hitting the mic. We'll say, I'll just type in double. All right, so pretty sure that, let me just see if there, I'll just go through the presets because I think we could do this with the presets. So let's come over here to, sorry about that. Let's go to apply preset. I think there is a double and half the notes preset. Pretty sure there's a standard, I think double tempo or half tempo. So if you come here, let's say if I want to do that. So if we wanted to come to the event itself, and we'll take a look at that particular preset, just so we could show you how to do it by other percentages. Sorry, it took a while to find that. So we could just say half tempo. So here we could just change the length and position and multiply by 2. So if I'm looking at the editor here, I could just come over here and say apply, and that will just get twice as long. Or you could just set the percentage directly there. So sorry, it took me a while to find that. All right, we see Gareth just asking what happened to Ambient Dave. Yes, if anyone talks to him, please tell him we said hello. You miss seeing him on. All right, so we see a question. Is it possible to use my Digidesign C24 control with the MIDI remote tool? I'm using it now with the Nyronic software. So I think as you know, I think that's like the little translation software. As long as it's transmitting MIDI messages, which I believe is what it's doing. I know, you know, that there was like a translation software that took it from proprietary format to, you know, spitting out standard MIDI messages. So if you do that, you know, as long as it is transmitting MIDI, you could map the functions to do, you know, whatever you want it to in Cubase. All right. So it just says recently watched an effects chain with a small reverb and a large reverb on gate with another program, Audio Effect Racks. Pretty easy. Any chance of something similar in development? I know third party, but so if you wanted to, just so let's say if we create 2 effect channels. So I'm not familiar with the other tools, how it works, but let's say if I added a revelation here, and then let's say at this point of like I wanted this to be short. So let's say just a quick ambience bright, and I wanted to add this to, let's say we add another effects channel. So we'll come here, add an effects channel again. So let's do a revelation. Let's say we want this to be really long. All right, and let's just go ahead and say our delay time. So let's say our main time we'll make really large. So on this, we could now put this as, let's say we have our insert, and let's say if I just wanted to put even just a quick gate here, if you wanted to manually gate it afterwards. So if I wanted to do both of those, I could send a group channel. So we could call this combined verb. So now you could just take this one particular track and send it to, so let's say we want this to now go to both of those verbs. We could just say, okay, we'll come over here and send it to our combined verb group. And then you could have it short and long gated if you wanted to blend, and then you could just come over here and adjust each of the volumes if you want. So let me know if that makes sense or if that works for your workflow. Then you could save that as track preset if you wanted to. Right, so see some discussion on headphones of audis or focals. So. All right, so we just see, hi, is it possible to quantize group edit audio tracks where all moves are the same? I have a guitar with amp and DI from the same. I want to do edits where the DI where I can clearly see the transients, but have it also affect the guitar amp track. So yeah, if you group the two, and so let's come over here and I won't play this because for Gareth's sake, but we'll show you what you could do. All right, so let's say I have like a lead, let's say DI and, let's say DI and a guitar track. So if I come over here, one of the things we could do is just hit Control G, and that would group the different effects. So if I wanted to come here and edit, I can move and edit, and both parts would automatically be applied. And Now, if I just have these two events selected, we could also just do free warping. So if I wanted to just come over here to see both the, guitar parts, at that point, we could just, if they're both selected, we could do edits applied across them. And even if we wanted to just take this and say, okay, we now want it to adjust, if we have both of these selected, we can, choose to edit the clip gain. But with version 12, we could do all of your audio warping as well across multiply selected tracks. So that's really, so even though you move one, since they're both selected, they both react together. So that was one of the new features in 12 with the warping. All right, great to see Michael Marshall. And Michael Marshall, there was someone who lived in your hometown, lived in the same town you did, who was maybe wanting to reach out, meeting someone in the same town. So if you want to email me, if you're interested in getting in touch with that person, you could email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. I don't know the person, but... All right, so I just see a question. So it says, I just purchased a monogram CC for my Cubase 12. In MIDI remote, is it possible to have several setups for the same MIDI device, like arranging setup, mixing setup, etc.? So I think what you could do, maybe, I haven't tried this, is maybe if you have like your MIDI remote set up, and let's say if we're here, is maybe if we go to the setup that you could choose to deactivate. So let's say if I go to like my choice os controller here, that, we could just, let's see if we could come over here. So let's say if we go to the script, that maybe you could disable the controller script and have another controller script for the same device. So maybe you could have choice os edit or choice os 100 mix, and you could maybe just deactivate and open up different controllers. But if you have 8 physical controllers, it's you might have to do a workaround like that, depending on the number of controls that you have. All right, so we have a question. When I'm mixing a project, is there a way to disable all the plugins one time as opposed to one by one? So if you have a number of plugins in a particular project, let's come over here. And let's go to like the large mix console. So you might be able to do within the project logical editor. Let's take a quick look to see if we could do it there. Sorry about that. My son's bus should be home soon. All right, so let's say if we come over here, yeah, so it looks like we could even, so let's say, okay, so let's say, let's take a different approach here. So let's say if I wanted to remove, if I wanted to bypass all inserts, you know, one way to do it is, okay, we want to say media type is, or we'll say, we could say container type is equal to track. And then we could say track operation, EQ bypass, enable. We'll go to track operation and say inserts bypass, enable. All right, sends bypass. So at this point, so you could just disable just like that. And if you wanted to, and you could also choose to toggle. So we could do that on like all tracks. So that'd be one way. Another way is just to go into like the large mix console, and you can have these functions. They're under state buttons, and if you hold down Alt or Option, you could bypass all of your inserts, EQs, channel strips, or sends right here. So you could bypass all of those functions. So two different ways to kind of skin the cat. All right, so we just see when Hallian work without a dongle. So, you know, currently you can run it with a Softie licenser, so you could run it without a dongle for the last couple versions. But if you have it on a hardware USB-E licenser, they haven't announced when Hallian will be transitioning. You know, obviously, I think we'll see Nuendo, which is slated for release next week. That will be the next one to go without the USB-E license or transitioning to the new license system. But it's, you know, it's just a process, and it's a very involved process technically to do that. So we'll just but I haven't heard a definitive date when to expect Hallian, but I know it's being worked on. Gareth is saying that I get a tickle every time you press the like button, so that's good. All right, so we see when I double click, question, when I double click on a MIDI event, is it possible that it gets zoomed in by default to the notes in the note editor? It always zooms out when I have MIDI events in my song in a row. All right, so let's take a look. Jump back to previous project. That's some MIDI data. All right, so say if I double click on this event, all right, so we can see that it's all right. So you know, if we look at this particular, so we have this kind of synced to the project window. So now if we double click, you know, we could have that, and let's say if we just switch this to bars and beats real quick. So let's say if I have my zoom level set here initially, so let's say now when I double click, so we can see that that will, let's go to like a real small MIDI event here and double click. So, you know, why it may double click to go to, you know, like the part will, you know, it's because we have the grid line synced between the two of them. But let's say if I have this selected, and I think we could zoom to selection. So, you know, I guess we could maybe do that. Let's try within the editor. So let's say if I'm just in the editor here, if we're in the full, and then we do a zoom to selection or zoom to event, that you could see kind of the whole event. But I think it's primarily because, you know, most people will want to have kind of a direct continuity between the zooming between the editors, but you could disable that, so you could try playing around with that a bit. All right, so we have Spike Williams checking in from Wales. He says, thanks for guidance on the HSO multi-channels. That's why he missed the last hangout. He was too busy composing, so that's good. All right, and we see from Audio Gigolo, says, you're doing an amazing job. These streams definitely, but customer service, put customer service above any other. Glad you're enjoying these. So yeah, I really do. So it's great. Okay, so all right, so we see from Critical Hit Studio, this is about the articulations. So it says with BBC SO Pro, when using MIDI dynamics, the articulation dynamics, the dynamic changes are registered in the mix console history, while the articulation changes are not. Any way to stop that from happening? So it's probably, you know, depending on how the instrument is implementing dynamics, so that may be writing or sending kind of automation data. So not all instruments will do that. So that may be kind of an anomaly of how Spitfire, and I don't use any of their instruments, but how they actually implement dynamics is maybe not by MIDI CCs, but by by volume automation. So maybe it's doing something like that, and that's what's kind of confusing the two. So. All right, we have Samson Strike saying hi from Austria. Thanks for joining the live stream today. All right, so I just see question. If I select sample in pool and right click show in Finder, this does not work. Is there any way to do this? So it could really depend, like if a sample, let's come over here and let me open up the pool. Sometimes, audio, if it's in like a protected loop or something like that, it may not show. But let's say if we come here, let's say I'm going to right click and I think there's a reveal in Finder or some. All right, so sorry about that. Let me just. All right, so let me just. Thought there was. See, reveal in Finder, duh. Okay, so if I come here, then it's automatically showing it in the Finder, but maybe if it is a sample based, some content may be restricted. So let's say if I take, so let's say we take vocals 128, and we'll see if that shows in Finder, because this may be kind of, yeah, so if it's going to be a VST sound archive file that's kind of protected, as kind of intellectual property for that, but other files are. So, all right, we see Benny is looking forward to the next Zoom meeting despite his poor English. Well, I'm sure your English is probably better than my Swedish. So, but yeah, I look forward to that. I think it'll be next Friday, so a week from Friday. So I'm looking into those. Are always really enjoyable for me as well. All right, so we just see a question. Is it possible that the undo function really undoes everything I have done and not just a few specific things? So one, there's kind of two different undo histories. There's one kind of we could think of for edits and one for the mix console. So there may be some things like, if you hit play or stop, it's not going to undo like transport commands. But if you're doing edits or changes and plugins and mix console settings, those things will be done. So, all right, we see Gareth is taking his dinner break. See, Spike Williams is threatening to post in Welsh. So. All right, so we have a question. Is it possible to mix mono, inverse, and stereo in I guess, in ref? So one thing that you could do if you wanted to have like the verse be very, so you could mix if you go to the control room, like in this case, I'll just revert this because I probably destroyed it. So if you wanted to mix and go back and forth to always kind of check mono compatibility, you could do that quite easily in the control room. Or if you wanted to kind of have the verses be very mono and then have it spread in the chorus. So if I wanted to just monitor, we could go to the down mix presets and listen in mono or stereo. And if I wanted to do this for like an automated process, we could come over here to maybe the Imager plugin. All right, so let's come over here and we'll just make this one band. Musical history laid out on the floor. I've got to choose what's mine and what's yours. So let me just, sorry, I'll just set this here. So let's say we'll just do one band. Okay, so we'll have this activated. So let's say I wanted to have it more stereo as we go on. So you could say, okay, I want this. And let's go ahead and just automate this. So if I want to add more emphasis to the chorus. So say we have the chorus coming up here, so I'm just going to widen it out. So we can make the chorus sound bigger and wider. And then when we go to the chorus, or back to the verse, so now if we wanted to listen to it again, so we have mono, and then if we wanted to go chorus, like, and have the chorus be very wide, again, it's just automated. And then you have kind of a nice contrast with that. We see Michael Pierce is having to take off, so thanks for joining us today, Michael. So we see, have you covered Dolby Atmos before? So we covered it a bit on the last live stream. So, but if you wanted to get Dolby Atmos set up for your project, one is you want to make sure that you're at 48K in the project. So let's say if we just do brand new project, and we want to make sure that the buffer size of your audio interface is set to 512. It's kind of a weird requirement, but let's say we're going to come over here. So to get Dolby Atmos going, let's say if we have a number of audio tracks, so let's say we have 22 audio tracks. And so, what's great about this is we get to the project and we see ADM authoring for Dolby Atmos. And at that point, we could do a setup assistant. We could see we want to probably have a 714 bed. We could add the bed and route all of the tracks directly to that. And then you should see kind of the renderer for Dolby Atmos appear. And then if you wanted to, you have beds, which we could think of as elements that are kind of stable, almost kind of like groups, like I wanted, different things, or we could have objects. So at this point, we want to down mix to binaural, and we could just come right over here. So let's say I'll just open up my ADM authoring, and then I could take those particular tracks and just say, create objects from those particular tracks. So we could have our objects here, and as we wanted to do editing, we come over and open up the editor, and then we could kind of do all of our mixing within our Dolby Atmos directly there. So All right, so we just see a question. Is there a way to display the track I/O routing on the bottom view mixer? So in the lower zone, it isn't, because kind of the intention was that, if we have a track selected, we can always see the I/O quite easily in the inspector. So, because we had, less space to work with, that was one of the things. It's like, we could see all of the, most people have kind of the default inspector open. So, being that we could see all of the IO from within this screen, that's why it's kind of not set up to see the input output routing directly there. All right, so I know I have some questions that were sent in. I want to thanks for let's get to those before I run out of time. Sorry about that. So, all right. So we see a question. Every time I press the space bar, the locator returns to the start of the selection. I wanted to continue from where it stopped. The only configuration I found didn't change that. So right now, let's say I'm going to start at measure 25-ish. All right, so when I hit the space bar, it starts to play. And then I'm going to hit the space bar to stop it. And right now it stopped exactly where it was. And to change and toggle that behavior, we go to Preferences to Transport. And then we will say return to start position on stop. So if we... So if that is turned off, so now when I hit play, it will automatically do the function. So it's going to start right after. When I hit the space bar again, it's going to go to where we stopped. So just change this preference again under transport and uncheck return to start position on stop. And now when we hit OK, it's going to stop exactly where it stops instead of going back to the beginning. All right. Okay, we had this sent in from Jan, and he was kind enough to send a project. I don't have any of the files in the project, but so it sees, just says, I think there's an issue with the arranger track and only in the project attached, because if I create a new project arranger track, it works as intended. The issue is when I do mix down, it creates a linear mix down. The project worked for a time, maybe 20 mix downs or so, when it suddenly stopped doing a proper mix down. Note, if I create a new project that works arranger track as it is intended, I've tried every possible way to make the project work. I've deleted arranger track and created new, deleted all change without result. All right, so let's go ahead and just take a quick look at it here. So let's say we'll look at the arranger track. All right, so when we're kind of playing along, so I probably don't have... All right, so it's going to play the A part. All right, so let's go to B here, then it's going to jump to C. Okay, so it says it seems as if the locator starts before the first object in the arranger chain, then the mixdown also starts at the beginning of the locator. What did I miss? So let's see if I have this kind of, I'll go to my arranger track here and let's flatten the chain. Okay, and let's say if we export, we do like a stereo out. And I don't have kind of all the files, but it could be, I'm not sure what specific part, but sometimes it could be that, let's see, that particular notes, if it's not being kind of triggered into the arranger chain, like if it's missing a particular note, and if that's kind of the issue, make sure that, you know, the arranger chain, I'll just undo that, but make sure that, you know, sometimes what can happen, like with MIDI notes, if we come here and if they're ever so slightly ahead, you know, so really kind of look in and make sure that there's no parts that are slightly ahead of the beat. Because if that is outside of where the arranger chain starts, then that could cause problems. But if you want to send me some more info or maybe like a download link to the whole file, I might be able to take a look at it some more, Jan. Okay, so I just see I have difficulty, question, I have difficulty using the score notation in Cubase 11. Can we, for example, creating notation, starting a project using MIDI piano, for example? Thank you. Okay. Okay, so often when we're working with piano parts, it could be tricky because people don't necessarily play perfectly in time. So let's go ahead and take a look at something that we may want to clean up that is a typical kind of piano performance. Let's say we'll look at this little Rhodes part here. So often if we look at this in notation, it may kind of look very nonsensical, something that you wouldn't want to give musicians. But let's say we wanted to do this in a grand staff and clean up the piano notation. So we could go to our score settings, which we could just kind of access here, or we could just double click like where this line is just to the left. So what I would do is go to the main tab here. So we want to set the key. So I think this is in A flat major. We then want to say the smallest note that I rhythmically played. So we could do a display quantization. Smallest rest I intended. Okay, so maybe I had a little bit of a swing. I want to consolidate rest. I'm shuffling, swinging a little bit. And let's go to our staff and we could say, let's do a split, a grand staff. And now we could take kind of what is pretty nonsensical musically and just have that part laid out for you that quickly. So start with the, you know, setting the key, setting the clef, and try display quantize, and usually just kind of check these little like rhythmic interpretations, and I think you'll be like 90% there. All right, so question. I have a UR44 that I use with the DSP direct monitoring, but when activating the control room, I don't have access to the track's hardware settings. So yeah, this is kind of an annoyance that with in this part that's done by Yamaha, when we go to the audio connections, if the control room is currently activated, that you don't see like the hardware setup for the DSP of the UR44. So, but if I go to my outputs and I say, okay, we have a stereo output and this is connected to these particular outs, and then I have my input connected. So now when I do this, we could say, let's add an audio track and I want to record, I want it to be stereo. As soon as we do this, now we see the UR24C settings for all the DSP. So I know that the team from Yamaha in Japan is aware of this, and I brought this to their attention numerous times. I think we may see kind of a resolution to make this more practical so that we could use the control room functionality and still have the DSP. And I think from the side of the engineers that designed it this way is because, it needs to have an input to go to the output, and when nothing is set up in the outputs, it doesn't know what to do, so the internal DSP doesn't show up. And I know it's annoying, but I think we may see a fix coming in the pipeline. It annoys me as well, and I just hassle them about it every time I see them. Okay, question. Is it possible to solve the Q-send limitation? We have more people with personal monitoring routing, for example, in a recording with 12 people at the same time with independent mixes between them. Thank you so much. So, you have 4 Q mixes, plus you're going to have a 5th Q mix, which would be for, for the control room. And if you needed an additional 8 Q mixes, at that point, you would just have to use the control. You could just use the aux sends to feed groups and have those groups output to different headphones on your within your headphone monitoring system. So you'd have to use the aux sends if you needed 12 independent Q mixes. All right, so we see a question. As a longtime fan of Prologue, Spectre, and Mystic, I'm very disappointed that they have been neglected and not supported in Cubase 12. They are in all my songs. They're so underrated and so versatile. I read on Cubase forum that there's a way to use them. If on Windows, you can copy the synth engine.vst3 from your Cubase 11 installation and insert it into Steinberg/Cubase/VST3 folder. I'm not sure if you can save the presets. Can you confirm this, please, Greg? And also, please, can you reconsider that if you save these legacy VSTs for future Cubase 12 update? I also miss the unique monologue VST. It had a very particular sound that I like. Thanks. So, we did those in conjunction with another company, and they're not going to be updated for future operating systems. So I've read the same thing, that people have copied that file over and it seems to work for them, and the plugins will still function. Now, if it comes to Windows 12, as new processors come out, they may not be supported, but if you wanted to use that, give it a try. I haven't tried it yet, so I can't personally comment on that. Okay, so we just see a question. Thanks for the great service at the Club Cubase live streams. I've just switched back to Nuendo 11 after some years with different DAWs. I hope it's possible to ask a question regarding Nuendo, although the form is for Cubase. So the form is really for any Steinberg product. Says I work 50-50 in my main studio, my home studio. If I change, for example, a key command and a preset for a plugin, create, change macro, etc., I want to have that automatically synchronized to other Macs. Is that possible? So I know some systems, and you mentioned it later in the question, that if you put it in a documents folder, that you could synchronize it via iCloud. So I think it's a limitation of iCloud that it only synchronizes particular folders. There's probably some third-party utility that can keep those 2 folders, the location of where it is in, anywhere, and keep those 2 files synced. You could easily, what I know a lot of people do is save a profile and upload it to a particular drive. You could put that in a documents folder, and that profile could then be imported when you go back to the other ones. It's not automatically synced. I'm sure that there is a sync option between that you can set that is more flexible, that allows you to choose something besides the documents folder. The reason why it's not in the documents folder is that, as you update 2 different Cubase versions, it knows exactly where to look for, and we don't want to make it too easy for all of those files to be deleted. So, we do that. All right, so we had another question: how to add tracks to a folder, colorize them, and route to a particular output. All right, so let's say I wanted to take like these 3 tracks, and I wanted to name the tracks, apply a color, and route them to a particular output. So let's see if we could do that quickly. So let's go to the project logical editor. Let's see if we can get this done before my time runs out. Got 2 minutes. All right. So we want to take selected tracks. And we'll say property is set to event is selected. And here we want to set color, set to fixed value, let's say yellow. And I want it to set name. So let's say we wanted to replace name. And I think in this case they were doing like a Leslie organ. And let's set it to a particular output. So we'll go to track operation and connect output, and we want the output to be set to our 5.1 out. So if I did this right, we're going to take these selected tracks and rename. All right, and that did it. So you see that it is recolored the tracks. It is changed the name to Leslie and changed the output on all of those tracks. All right, so with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up. We're just about at time. I want to thank everyone for the lovely questions. We hope that everyone has learned something. If you learned a new trick, make sure you do hit the like button. And we will be back on Friday at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern. So I want to thank again everyone. We want everyone to stay safe and healthy. And we will see everyone back on Friday. Goodbye.